SOPL. So my name is Sachiko Iwaguchi. I'm a Japanese language librarian here in Maine. Welcome. I'm going to introduce very briefly that I am going to introduce President of the Japan Society of Northern California, Steve Pollack, Mr. Pollack. And then Mr. Pollack will introduce Jake Adelstein. Now I would like to invite Mr. Steve Pollack, President of the Japan Society of Northern California. Steve.
Thank you, Sachiko, and wow, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I'm Steve Pollack, President of the Japan Society of Northern California, and this is actually our 120th anniversary this year. So we've been around a long time, and thank you to all of those of you who are either members or corporate supporters of our activities. We do a very extensive calendar of activities throughout the year. We have about 70 programs we've done each year, the last 2 years. And they range from cultural programming to programs on innovation, business, technology, healthcare. And then we also have Japanese language lessons that we teach that help to fund our overall program activities like this. We try very hard to make our programs free of charge to those who attend. So thank you for coming out tonight. Before I get started, I wanted to ask a couple questions. How many of you are coming to your very first Japan Society event tonight? Raise your hand. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, great. And how many of you are regular attendees at our programming? Good. I'm glad to see a few of you managed to find seats today. That's good. And how many of you have watched Tokyo Vice on TV? Okay, just about everybody. And how many of you have read the book Tokyo Vice? Okay, good. Many fewer, but that's good. And just checking, is there anybody here who works for the Yakuza? Okay, I saw one hand. I'm not going to point in any direction. Well, today it's my great pleasure to introduce Jake Adelstein, who is here from Tokyo, Japan. You probably recognized him walking around on the stage. He's the one who looks like Ansel Elgort, in case you weren't sure. And Jake is a real expert on Japan's Yakuza, or organized crime. But that's not all. He's an expert on many other things in Japan that are often not reported very often. I think a lot of us are familiar with many cultural activities, but Japan is also a place where there is a very active illicit sex industry, child pornography, human trafficking, serial killers, dog breeders, fraud, pachinko, official malfeasance, and high levels of government corruption, and even lately, even more fraud in the digital realm with Bitcoin and crypto scams. Jake has investigated and reported on many of these different areas. Even though he grew up in Missouri and actually went to Japan on a bit of a lark during college, he arrived in 1988 and then studied at Jochi University, Sophia University in Tokyo. He decided to take the entrance exam and was accepted at Yomiuri Shimbun as a cub reporter, a freshman reporter, along with a class of other reporters, Japanese. He was the only American working there. And he covered the crime beat, which includes the Yakuza, organized crime world in Japan. His work on the newspaper eventually turned into his best-selling memoir, Tokyo Vice. And then Tokyo Vice which came out in 2009 and then was later the basis for the HBO series. Although we'll talk a little bit about I'm going to ask him whether that really reflected reality or if it was somewhat made up. Well, anyway, we're very lucky to have Jake here from Tokyo to tell us his story and answer your questions. And before you get started, I'd like to thank the San Francisco Public Library for hosting us tonight. This is our first event. Thank you. It's our first event at San Francisco Public, and we hope to do more in the future. I also want to thank Japan Airlines, who generously donated some mileage, which we used to get Jake to come here all the way from Japan. So,
yeah, thank you very much.
Japan Airlines. And outside in the lobby, I want to thank Kino Kunya, who is here selling some of Jake's books. He'll be doing some signing after the program tonight if you want to get a signed copy of a book of his. And then, of course, Jake for coming here, sparing time in his schedule, and coming all the way from Tokyo to join us this evening. So thank you, Jake, and look forward to having a good discussion.
Okay. I'm talking into my lapel here because I don't know if this mic is working. I'm going to move this up a little bit here. Thank you for coming. It's a huge crowd. It feels like the bar mitzvah I never had. First off, I'm going to show you a very short clip of 2 interviews I did with the Yakuza for a documentary for Vice News. The presenter who's on this briefly, on his first night at Kabukicho, he was roofied and charged thousands of dollars on his credit card. And we spent the next day of filming with me at the Shinjuku police station trying to get them to take a criminal complaint, which they didn't want to do because, you know, foreigners don't stick around to make the court cases. So there's that little fun aspect of this documentary. It's 10 minutes. There's 2 different Yakuza. One is the Yakuza who has become a good guy, and the other one is a guy who's trying to become a good guy and not doing a very good job at it, but he is trying. So without any ado, just because I think if after you see these 2 people, you'll get an idea of what it is like to spend 30 years dealing with Japan's organized crime members.
The Yakuza has dominated Japan's criminal underworld for over a century through a quiet code of brutality, extortion rackets, and gambling dens. But in the last 10 years, highly restrictive anti-Yakuza legislation has made life as a member of the Yakuza dysfunctional with modern-day Japan. Some say these laws have changed the Yakuza and corrupted the code that held them together. Their numbers have plummeted, leaving thousands of former members in limbo, exiled from the underworld and outcast by society. I wanted to find out what it's like to go back to a normal life after leaving a crime family, and why current members of the Yakuza refuse to let go. Jake Adelstein is an American reporter who worked on the police beat in Tokyo for over a decade. Jake spent his career halfway between reporting and living the life of a delinquent, immersed in the world of the Yakuza. Jake had some contacts he wanted to introduce us to. He agreed to meet me in his old stomping ground, Kabukicho, Tokyo's red light district, a place that was once synonymous with the Yakuza.
Oh man, that used to be a great nurse-themed sex club. Sad.
It used to be what?
A great nurse-themed sex club.
Nurse-themed sex club.
Well, it was it was a sexual massage, but it was a nurse theme.
You like your dress-ups?
I didn't say I like dress up.
Who are the Yakuza?
The Yakuza are 22 different designated organized crime groups that make their money in Japan from gambling, extortion, drug dealing, prostitution, child pornography, blackmail, fraud increasingly, and any other crime that you can think of. They used to have limits on what they would do and wouldn't do. They don't have any of those limits now.
Why do you think the Yakuza are in decline?
Well, they're in decline because the laws have gotten better. They criminalized paying off the Yakuza. Yakuza now can't collect money from people. They can't get a phone. They can't get a hotel room. They can't get an apartment. And they can have people substitute for them, but when they get caught, they go to jail. And that, more than anything, has made living life as a Yakuza so unpleasant that people are leaving in droves.
Do they still?
私はヤクザの人生、まあ、皆目懐かしくない。やはり苦痛よ。あの世界は。昔、このヤクザのもと、侠客いうのが最初出て、それが、やはり強きをくじき、弱きを助けるいう、その人共同精神でやってきたよ。でも昔はね、今の時代はお金の力強い。
So what are the practical steps to rehabilitating when you leave the Yakuza?
やはりね、私とこ相談に来るということは、真剣に考えた人ばかりよ。だから私は、これからはヤクザの時代違うから、ええことやと言うて、警察と連携を取って、で、組を出るようにしたり、ほな、その半分状さえあれば、日本の国は5年経たんでも、生活保護がもらえる。
When you left, there must have been a fear for your life. Did betrayal come at quite a heavy cost to you?
私は、鉄砲5発、ダンダンダン、 玄関撃たれたよ。で、私の場合、ヤクザを批判して、暴力団はダメ、ヤクザはダメ言って批判しとうから鉄砲撃たれた。
So they've never spoken to you about what you're doing or tried to reach out before they fired shots into your front door?
私は言われたことない。私は強い。これ来たら、パッと。
Thank you.
日本刀よ。これ私何かあれば侍。これ、腹切る。侍、指導貫徹。
But it's quite a violent act. It's designed to be one of the most violent ways to end your life.
同じよ。日本、ピストルバン撃つ。生き残ったら刑務所行かなあかん。刀であれば刑務所行かんでもいい。私許可持ってる。私は撃ち込まれるより命も惜しくない。これ山口組4代目。私の生き方。人は一代、名は松代。これが私の生き方よ。山口組4代目。私のボス。
How do you think he would feel if he could see the current state of essentially what's become his legacy?
やはりね、なんでこんなつまらん社会になったんやろと、ヤクザ社会がね、泣くよ。私はやはり一番尊敬する人よ。入れ墨まで入れたから。
Ordinary life?
まあ暴力団が偉いわけではないですけども、人よりやっぱり偉そうに道を歩いてたりとか、それが自分が避けなければいけない側に回る。まあ、正直なところ屈辱的。偏見です。元ヤクザという偏見。
Is it true that some people find it so hopeless that they end up committing suicide?
まあ、いらっしゃることはいらっしゃると思いますね。私の知人も去年亡くなりました。
Has anyone ever seen your tattoos in your workplace?
いません。まあ、なきゃない方がいいのかもしれないですね。普通に生きるんだったら。
Can you tell me the story of the first time you saw the Yakuza?
自分が喧嘩をしてた時です。本当にこの辺りで私は不良と呼ばれる集団でした。昔から悪かった。暴走族。毎日喧嘩してる。で最初はまあ私一人と相手が3人しかいなかった。3人ぐらいなら勝てるかなと。そしたら急に増えたね。間に入ってくれたのが相手に向かって殴って助けてくれたのがヤクザの人だった。すごくかっこよかったです。
Why are we getting in so many fights?
なんだろう。もやもやしてた。ずっとイライラしてた。小さい時から。理由はわからない。とにかくイライラしてた。考えるより先に手が出てしまう。
Do you remember the first time the family asked you to commit violence?
覚えてます。お坊さんで、ワンボックス車ですね。お坊さんがある方からお金を集めた、要するにお祭りみたいなことをするので、出資を集った。 でもそれは行われなかった。2週間ぐらいずっとそのお坊さんの家を見張って交代で。でお坊さんが来た時にスライドドアを開けて車の中へ。
And then what?
まあそれなりの、私に頼んだ人が納得いく行為をしました。
Was it fun?
嫌ではなかったです。最初不良、暴走族だった時は自分のために自分のむしゃくしゃする気持ちを解消するためにもちろん暴力を振るったし暴れたし、でもヤクザ、看板を大門を背負ってからは絶対に負けられない。自分の首の看板を汚すことになるから。
And what happens if you disgrace the badge of your organization? You've got all of yours though.
私は行儀が良かったので全部揃ってます。
Those two gentlemen were Takigaki Satoru-san, who was the bodyguard to the fourth generation leader of the Yamaguchi-gumi, who is now running an organization that helps Yakuza reintegrate into life. And the other individual, Mr. Koyama, is working as a nurse. But, you know, those are the two sort of Yakuza that you meet on the job. And you can see that they're kind of, you know, not in your face and they're not growling. And guys like Koyama are really scary when they're talking to you in that very quiet tone because you don't know when they're going to beat the shit out of you. And on that note, we're going to play a trailer for Tokyo Vice, the TV series. The TV series, as opposed to the book, I know there's some people who've seen the TV series and read the book, is all set in 1999. Because 1999 was an interesting time because people didn't have cell phones. Japan just was beginning to have camera phones. I was still faxing in stories. It was more interesting because there wasn't really an internet. You had to go and talk to people and collect information, and that makes for a better drama. We did take some elements from later in the book. With us today is former Special Agent Jerry Kawai, somewhere out there, who did the Emperor of Loan Sharks case, which was a Yakuza boss who set up $1 billion empire of loan sharking operations in Japan that looked like kind of consumer loan operations, and laundered about $5 million in Las Vegas, which was an interesting story. So we pulled some of that into the TV series, but there's no one as good looking as Jerry in the series. So without further ado, we're going to show that clip. It is a dramatic clip.
When you accept favors from the Yakuza,
You know who I am.
once you open a door, it is very hard to close. Do you trust me? What do you really want, Mr. Adelstein?
I've been writing this story and I got no leads.
こんな簡単な記事も任せらんないのか。
The root of the Yakuza runs so deep, we can never get rid of them.
どうやったら見つけられますか、奴らを。
Trust me when I say that acting rashly could jeopardize many things. You must have patience.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
I'm from Missouri. You know, Kansas is a completely different, arguably inferior state.
Be careful who you put your trust in.
There's something worth chasing here, right?
I love my life here. I don't want to lose everything that I made.
You and Sato, be careful.
Excuse me?
I don't want you to get hurt.
お前はどうする？首に残るのか。君の目だ。
This story is too important to get wrong.
That was the trailer for the series. We had 2 seasons, and it ended in the 2nd season, pretty much as we planned it, which is always nice because I think everybody hates a TV series that you like and it doesn't have a conclusion. There will not be a season 3. We have dismantled the set, much of which I stole when they dismantled it. I almost wore one of the Tozawa Gumi badges today, but I thought that would be inappropriate because they're the bad guys. You can read Tokyo Noir, which is as closest as you may get to a sequel. So are we going to put the Yakuza fan magazine?
The fanzine? Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that was fun that I salvaged from the set were these Yakuza magazines. So for the TV series, we made our own Yakuza magazines. And this is kind of a crazy thing because this was such a big part of the Yakuza world in Japan. I don't think there's any country in the world where there's like the Mafia Monthly. So, I mean, I have one here with me, which I'll pass around. Please don't steal it, kids. But on the cover of this one, this is a rare edition because it involves a dispute in the Inagawa Kai as to who would take over. You have the 4th generation leader of the Inagawa Kai, and you have the original founder of the Inagawa Kai. And I talked about this in the book, The Last Yakuza, which is my 2nd book. There was a huge fight as to who would take over the organization. And eventually, there were 2 camps. The grandson of the founder was trying to take over the organization, like a Kitano Takeshi Yakuza film. And then this Tsunoda-san, this sort of short little guy there, was also trying to take over the organization. So what eventually happened is they kidnapped the founder in the middle of the night and then played like enka for him on a cassette tape so that he would calm down. And then took him to one of the succession ceremonies. Since the founder was there, that became the official Inagawa Kai, and then that faction won. And the fact that this magazine discusses all of that in great detail means it was pulled from the stands and it's worth like $3,000 if you have a copy. But you know, when I started as a reporter and I got assigned to cover the Yakuza in 1994 as my job on the police beat, my mentor, who was Sekiguchi Chiaki, who was the model for Katagiri, he was like, okay, if you're going to be covering the Yakuza full-time, this is the first thing we need to do. So he went to a convenience store and he pulled out one of these magazines and he bought it and he gave it to me and he says, this is a Yakuza fan magazine. There are 3 of them. This is the best one. This is a monthly. You need to read it every month and keep track so you know who's who. And he's right. So, for example, this is, you can't see us here, this is photos of the Yamaguchi-gumi, like the top dogs, going to the funeral service for their founder. So every issue has photos of them coming out of meetings and then doing various rituals and things like making mochi for the people in the neighborhood. The Yamaguchi-gumi used to have a Halloween party, so sometimes they would have Halloween party pictures. I went to the Halloween party a couple times pretending to be the uncle of this Indian family that lived in the neighborhood. But even after they realized that I was a reporter, they still let me go, which was nice. I just always pretended to be, Uncle Jake. Actually, this is kind of interesting. So this is for the 3rd generation leader of the Yamaguchi-gumi. Taku Kazuo was considered the godfather of godfathers. That is the only famous Japanese person I share a birthday with. So another thing that they always have in these magazines is penis enlargement ads. Now you laugh, but the head of the Kudokai, Nomura Satoru, saw one of these ads and he got a penis enlargement. And when he was doing it, he winced. And the nurse that was handling it said to him, "Look at you with all your tattoos and you can't handle a little prick." And so he tried to have the nurse assassinated, which is one of the reasons he's doing life in prison. So you never know what can come out of these Yakuza ads. There's little comic books depicting various historical Yakuza. There's poetry. There's charts of who's on the top. There's also guides to the sexual massage parlors with in-depth reports. And then there's like a list of who's who, like who's been arrested, who hasn't been arrested, sometimes letters from prison. Then there's articles about the bad guys. So this is the head of the National Police Agency. This is an article saying, what is he trying to do? He's trying to get rid of the Yakuza. And then there's also articles about foreign crimes, because one of the things the Yakuza used to say is like, if you get rid of us, Japan will be taken over by barbarians like you. And that'll be bad for Japan's peace and stuff. And also this is a sort of historic issue because it has a discussion of the Boryokudan Haijo Jōrei, which is called the Boryokudan Exclusionary Ordinances. And that's what basically put the Yakuza out of business. Starting in 2009, Japan began putting on the books, prefecture by prefecture, weak laws, which are ordinances, which criminalize paying off the Yakuza. And that has continued it took 2 years for it to be passed in every place in Japan, and that has really made it difficult for the Yakuza to exist, because not only is it a crime to pay them off, but if you're Yakuza now, you can't get an apartment, you can't rent a car, you can't join a gym, because in every contract in Japan, there's now a clause which you have to sign that says, I am not a member of organized crime group, nor am I associated with them. But if you do sign it, and you are a Yakuza, and let's say you showed up in this magazine before, as soon as you've signed it, you've committed fraud, and then the cops come and arrest you, and they hold you for 23 days in jail, and maybe you get indicted. If you don't sign it, then you can't use the gym or play golf or get a telephone. So it is very inconvenient to be a Yakuza. So they have basically inconvenienced the Yakuza out of existence. So there were 80,000 when I started. There are now 20,000. The average age of a Yakuza is now 55. At 56, I would be an older Yakuza. And they are fading out, which I'm not sad about, but it's certainly something I write about less. I'm going to pass this down. Please have a look at it. Try and get it back up to me. I have 30 years of this magazine. Someday I'm going to get rid of it. Yep.
Well, great introduction, Jake, and thanks for giving us an overview of the Yakuza scene in Japan. So just, I think a lot of us think of Japan as a wonderfully safe place, like just a fantastic kind of a paradise, because you never have to worry about street crime or other things like that. But you document in your book in particular that there's a lot of other bad stuff going on in Japan. Can you just give us a little bit of an update of like, what is the crime scene? Is there crime in Japan? Is there serious crime in Japan? And is it something that we should know about? And if so, why isn't it better reported?
Okay, for most of the crimes that we make people uneasy, which are, theft, robbery, assault, being mugged, those crimes are far and few between, right? You can walk the streets late at night, and to some extent, you could credit the Yakuza for that, in the sense that if you have street crime, you don't have people coming to your establishments and spending money and buying booze. And weirdly enough, almost all Yakuza offices have on their wall like a list of things that will get you kicked out of the Yakuza, the things that are forbidden, and they forbid theft. They forbid armed robbery. They forbid sexual assault. Ostensibly, they forbid buying and selling drugs and using them, but that's more of a public-facing thing than an actual reality. But since they don't do those kind of crimes and don't let them happen in their neighborhoods, street crime has always been low in Japan. So you're probably not going to get mugged. You're probably not going to have your purse snatched. There is a lot of fraud. So if you live in Japan, there's whole businesses after businesses of defrauding people through either people calling, pretending to be your grandson desperately in need of money and asking if you can wire them the cash. Or the latest one is people calling and saying, I'm a police officer and your name and bank card showed up in an investigation of a fraudulent group. And we need you to come down to the police station immediately. Pack your bags and be ready to go in an hour. And then after a long conversation, they'll convince you that if you will move some of your money from your account to another bank account so they can track the money and make sure you're not part of the criminal organization, then you'll be fine, which people fall for. So a lot of fraud. Sexual assault is really underreported in Japan. Only about 4% of the cases are actually reported. That's often because the police don't want to take the cases. And then the prosecutors only prosecute about 50% of them. So that is one crime in Japan that is kind of a silent crime you don't hear much about because the police don't want to deal with it, and they're not trained to deal with it, and the prosecutors don't want to take the cases either. Other than that, Japan is pretty safe, unless you're a dumbass and go drinking in Kabukicho with some, if you go to Japan, you meet someone friendly and they tell you to come to their bar, do not do it.
And so you mentioned that the Yakuza were kind of in their heyday when you were early on. And in fact, I think even the Yakuza fanzines have basically gone out of publication, right?
Jitsuwa Documentu had its last issue in 2017. They did
very sad, I'm sure.
Very sad, very sad.
Regular readers. But so you said the laws have really changed to make life difficult for Yakuza. Has the economics of what they do also changed? Or has it primarily been a change in kind of the regulatory environment that's studied? Have the police changed their approach to Yakuza? What else has gone on with the decline?
Well, the main decline is Japan is very good about laws. If you create laws and they're enforced, they're very effective. So really, there used to be something called a sokaya. So sokaya was a stock manipulator. They specialized in interrupting Japanese stock meetings, for which they got paid a lot of money to make sure those problems were not aired. Then Japan criminalized paying off the sokaya. Then the sokaya disappeared. So it's the same way with the Yakuza. And most Yakuza, in some way, are kind of like Sekkom. Like Sekkom is like a home security outfit in Japan. You pay them a fee per month, and if you have a problem with a customer or a client or somebody who won't pay money, then they collect it for you. If there's a rowdy customer in your bar who won't behave themselves, you call the Yakuza and they will make them apologize and pay compensation and then beat the crap out of them and kick them out. Or if you're in the construction business and you have someone who gave you shoddy building materials or defaulted on a loan, then you would go to the Yakuza and they would take care of that as well. But that business model has really disintegrated because now it's a crime to pay them off. And so they've had to look for other revenue and not been very successful. That's why the numbers have been declining very steadily over since 2011, maybe 82,000 Yakuza down to 19,000 Yakuza. And nothing has really replaced them. The Japanese police are overemployed. There are more of them than are needed. They have nothing to do. And so there's cameras everywhere. So, Japan isn't a crime-free place, but everyone was like, when you get rid of the Yakuza, there'll be, lawless foreign mobs and new crimes taking over. That really hasn't happened.
So you, as an American, are in the middle of a Japanese newspaper, a very Japanese work environment. What made you a good person to go after the story with the Yakuza? And why didn't you stick out like a sore thumb and kind of get kept out of any kind of information or scoops that you might want to get as a foreigner? What made you a good reporter for that beat?
I hate to lose. I think that's always important as a reporter. You have to be really persistent. Working for a Japanese newspaper was hard. The hours are really long. Does anybody here actually subscribe to a newspaper? Great, I love you, thank you. The Yomiuri and a lot of the Japanese papers have an evening edition, and we have 3 different deadlines a day because the paper gets printed up and has to be distributed. So you're always on call, so it's a really hard job. It's very hierarchical like the army. In the TV series, I really did get called gaijin, but we all got treated shitty on our first year. So when you join a Japanese newspaper, at least the Yomiuri, it's like they can't be bothered to remember your name, so they just call you ichinensei, which means like first year. And so they could sort of gesture like ichinensei. And I got assigned to cover organized crime because the year before I'd been working on this crazy story about a dog breeder serial killer named Sekine Gen. Sekine Gen and his wife Hiroko killed probably 10 people over a period of time. They had recently killed 4 people, 2 customers who were unhappy with the dogs that had been sold, were threatening to go to the police, and then a Yakuza boss and his driver who realized that Sekine Gen had killed these people and fed their flesh to the dogs, and were blackmailing him. So he killed those 2 as well. And so we knew the Saitama police were investigating it, and we were all supposed to sort of try and figure out what happened to the victims. So I got assigned as my victims to follow this Yakuza boss and his driver. So the first thing I did was, because the Yakuza have offices and we know where they are, was to go to the office and knock on the door. And immediately a bunch of thugs came out and chased me into the taxi I had waiting nearby, which was smart. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to learn how to interface with these people better. And I was lucky enough that one of the people on that squad was a detective from the organized crime squad, Sekiguchi Chiaki. And just like in the series, I basically got on his good side by bringing ice cream to his daughters. He had 2 cute daughters. And I brought up the ice cream one night, and it was, melting in the car. And his wife invited me in, and he came out too. He's like, if you brought the ice cream, might as well come in and eat it with the kids. And so I did very well at covering that story and the organized crime elements of that story. So in 1994, my boss Yamamoto, kind of looked like a porcupine, came over and said, hey, Jake, you're going to be covering the Organized Crime Control Division 1 and 2, and you're also going to be covering theft. Congratulations, it's the big time. You're covering Saitama Police Headquarters. And it's an honor. Only the elite get to be, on the police beat proper. And I was like, that's great, but I wanted to cover homicide. And he was like, well, homicide's really important news. And white collar crimes, let's face it, you're shitty at math. And they don't like you. And he's like, but the Yakuza, these cops are weird. And actually, you may not know this, but 30% of the Yakuza are Korean Japanese. So they're gaijin, and you're a gaijin. So it's a perfect match.
So the show depicts what you presented in Tokyo Vice and is basically your life story. And tell us about what it was like having the show kind of pick up your book, create this portrayal of what it was like to be Jake Adelstein, the threats to your life, I'm especially curious to know what it was like having a girlfriend who was the mistress of a Yakuza. What was that? Didn't you ever feel in danger in that period of time? Or
actually twice, actually. Okay. The first Yakuza disappeared. I ended up shacking up with his girlfriend. So Endo Makoto goes missing, and I'm investigating his life, and I went to this hostess club where his mistress worked. I think in the book I didn't say that it was his mistress because at that time it was too close to.
Could have got you in trouble.
It could have got me in trouble. Could have got her in trouble. She's in Saitama somewhere, happily married under a new name, so that's fine. But yeah, that was my first time dating a Yakuza mistress, and it was interesting because one day one of the Inagawa Kai members showed up at the door and was very angry. It's like, how dare you be sleeping with Endo's wife? And I thought I was going to be killed, but I was like, excuse me, your boss is dead, and I am taking care of his mistress. You should thank me. And he was so impressed by the chutzpah that we became friends. And later he became my bodyguard. So that's another long story. And then,
did you feel like the show did a good job representing you? Was it strange? Did you feel like it kind of over dramatized certain things in the interest of creating good stories?
Of course it dramatized things. And I knew that it would dramatize things. Dating the boss of this really awful Yakuza who got the liver transplant, dating his mistress was really weird. But we were united in the fact that we both hated him. And then when everything sort of fell apart at the end, I made sure that she got out of the country and with a new name and a new identity. So we still stay in touch, but it's, once a year. The nice thing about the show was, so who here knows like Hollywood terms? Because I didn't know any of these. Who knows what a showrunner is? Okay. So a showrunner is the person who is in charge of making sure that everything on the show is consistent, that the scripts, stay together, that Spock always has pointy ears, those kind of things. So the showrunner for Tokyo Vice was J.T. Rogers. And J.T. and I went to high school together. So J.T.
You suggested him for the role, right?
Yeah. I almost would say I demanded him for the role, but yes, I suggested him for the role. Because he's written really good plays set in foreign countries. So he's really good at historical drama. And actually the only reason that the Tokyo Vice actually came together as a TV show was because in 2017, he won the Tony Award for this play called Oslo. And Oslo is this really great dark comedy about the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks in Norway, which is, not the thing you would think would be a award-winning play, but he did a really good job on it. And then in Hollywood, he had clout, right? Because normally they don't really care about Broadway, but if you win the Tony Award, you sort of have like status, like, you're an artist. Yeah. And so he had already secretly enlisted Watanabe Ken, who wanted to play the detective role. And then Ansel Elgort raised his hand and said, I read the book and I want to do the part. There was actually another actor who was being considered more favorably, which is Dylan something or other, who was in The Maze Runner. But Ansel was really, really enthusiastic. And he was like, I will learn Japanese. I will dedicate myself to nailing this role. And I said, if he really wants the part so badly, I think we should give it to him because enthusiasm counts. Japanese is really hard to learn. So we want someone who's really like gung-ho, and he seems gung-ho about this. I also wanted him to get a haircut, but clearly that didn't happen.
Well, I have more questions, but I know the audience is filled with people who came here expressly to hear from you, and I'm sure there are many people out there who have something that they would like to ask. So I'm going to ask for people to raise their hands, and then we'll try to get to a few questions for Jake from the audience. Okay. What's that?
Oh,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The first question, anybody? Jake, you can.
Who? Is there a question over here?
Hi, Jake. Love the book. Passing the Yomiuri written exam was a great accomplishment, but what I want to know is, how did you learn to speak and understand kabukicho Japanese? That stuff is hard.
Sort of the language of the underworld is hard to learn. I just spent a lot of time with them. They do have a slang. Kansai Japanese, which is what the Yakuza of the Yamaguchi Gumi speak, still, I can understand it, but I can't speak it, and I don't want to speak it. It would be like me speaking with a Boston accent. It just wouldn't go over very well. But yeah, reading and listening and watching a lot of Yakuza films and cop films, that helped.
Great. Other questions? Over here? Somebody in the middle back there?
Thank you, Jake. We met a long time ago at the Foreign Correspondents Club in Tokyo. The Kurokai leader, Nomura-san, was sentenced to death years ago, and I think that was overturned. Did that have any impact on the Yakuza in terms of their impact in Japan?
Nomura
was the judge that sentenced.
Nomura-san
to the death sentence, but I think that was overturned.
Yeah, he was.
And that was pretty shocking at the time.
Yeah, Nomura Satoru was sentenced on his appeal to life imprisonment because they said they couldn't pin one of the deaths on him. But everybody secretly speculates that when he told the judge, like, you will regret this for the rest of your life, that the second judge was like, I'm not going to regret this for the rest of my life, and overturned the death penalty. Yeah, because the Kudokai is nuts, man. They're the guys that throw grenades at people. There was this one time in Fukuoka Prefecture, they were offering $1,000 for everyone who turned in a grenade. because the Kudokai was throwing grenades into the offices of rival Yakuza groups. And they're really scary. For a second, I thought maybe I could get someone on base to send a crate of grenades to a coin locker and then like call it in, but I decided that was probably unethical. Plus, I don't think he could have found 100 grenades, so there we are.
Other questions? Maybe down here?
ジェイクさん、前から尊敬しました。
はいはい、よろしくお願いします。
今日は本当に楽しかった。I have a random question.
Okay.
Your book, The Last Yakuza, the character Saigo-san.
Yep.
Did you name him Saigo because he was last, or because too close? Sorry, not close enough. Or because Coach was from Kyushu?
Oh, you know, there is the Saigo Takanamori thing, right? And I thought about that. That's one of the reasons, because also Saigo is the synonym for last. I wanted to use his real name, but the problem with the book was, and I think I read it in the forward, Japan changed the statute of limitations in 2010. So they repealed the statute of limitations on murder retroactively. So I had all these dudes who had told me about people they killed when they were young, thinking that they couldn't go to jail for it. And then suddenly they could. And so, you know, the Saigo became an amalgamation of two different Yakuza, and I mixed up the details so the police couldn't go back and arrest one of them, which is why I didn't use his real name and had to make this weird compromise. But yeah, but I definitely picked Saigo for Saigo Takamori and the fact that he would be, yeah, thank you.
With you afterwards?
What? Yes, you can.
Let's get the one question from female.
Okay. You find one for
me. I noticed that the director, Alan Paul, is bilingual, and I'm wondering how much of that I think was a big factor of the success of Tokyo Vice.
Oh, that's a great question. I forget that I don't have I can just speak like this. Alan Pohl is an incredible Japan hand. He went to school in, I think, Nara, and he's still in touch with his host family. So he's very bilingual, and that really helped because between him and JT, that was kind of our quality control. But the other most important person that you don't hear about is Mari Yamamoto. So Mari Yamamoto was a journalist, and she's an journalist actor, and we also wrote for the Daily Beast for many years. You can currently see her playing Dr. Miura on Monarch, Legacy of Monsters on Apple TV. So she has been a Japanese journalist and then a Western journalist and also is now making a great living as an actor. But for Tokyo Vice, she was in the writer's room as a sort of consultant, jack of all trades. So every time the writers would come up with some stupid ass idea, I would get like a bulletin. Like she'd be like, Jake, like, you know, the dude, he wants to have a Russian mafia storyline and he says it really happened. And I'm like, okay, Mari, thank you. So Mari is like this uncredited powerhouse in both seasons of the show because she was there to make sure that there was authenticity, to make sure that the writers didn't come up with things that couldn't happen. And then I was like the final barrier, the one that would be like, we'd have this kind of conversation with me and JT, which would go like this, like, hey JT, there's a scene where Katagiri comes home, there's a Yakuza waiting for him, he pulls out a gun. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, that can't happen. And he'd be like, why can't that happen? I said, because Japanese cops go to work, they check out their gun, and when they go home, they check it back in. Nobody takes their gun home. And he would be like, well, is there a world in which he might have his gun at home? And I'd say, yes, there is that world in which he has his gun at home and all the Japanese people are green and all the gaijin are purple, but not on this earth, JT. And so, yeah, that was the quality control. We had, Watanabe Ken would sometimes go over the Japanese dialogue. We had myself, we had Alan, and then I think we also had like an ex-cop weigh in there. So to keep it as authentic as possible, there were many layers, and Alan was certainly a huge asset in doing that. Good question.
Maybe somebody in the back, is there a question?
I was wondering about political corruption. Is there political corruption in the Yakuza as well?
Oh, the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan was founded by a Yakuza, Kodama Yoshio, with Yakuza money. Prime Minister Abe's grandfather, Kishi Nobusuke, was a notorious criminal, actually a war criminal, who fraternized with Yakuza. I mean, they're so embedded in the political system in Japan. And a matter of fact, Japanese political factions, the Liberal Democratic Party has many factions. They refer sometimes to conversation to the leader of their faction as the Oyabun, and that is a Yakuza term. I like to joke that the only difference between the politicians and the Yakuza is that they have different badges.
Maybe somebody down here? Maybe one more question?
One more question. Okay, this is from your advice column.
Okay.
So, if you're a writer and you find yourself writing historical fiction about Japan that includes all of a sudden the Yakuza, what advice can you give someone where they don't get their legs broken?
Oh.
This is real.
These days, because of employer liability, which means that any crime committed by a lower level Yakuza that the boss has to pay for, they're much less likely to use violence. So, less likely. So there used to be a code of silence, but then Goro Taramasa wrote a book called Habakari Nagara, which basically means pardon me, but fuck you, and which he, discussed his ties to Soka Gakkai, the Buddhist sect, the favors he did for political people like Ito Yamaitaro, and basically, burned everyone. And since then, there have been Yakuza book after Yakuza burning people and revealing secrets, so they don't have the time to get angry at people who are revealing their secrets anymore, generally speaking. Also, from personal experience, it helps to have one Yakuza boss who really likes you. Domo, arigatou gozaimashita.
Great. Well, Jake, I know we talked a lot about Tokyo Vice and the Yakuza tonight, but you have a bunch of other projects that you've been working on. You have your other books, so feel free to tell us a little bit about The Last Yakuza and Tokyo Noir, which are kind of a continuation, I guess, of some of your memoir in terms of your activities. And then you have a podcast or podcasts that you've been doing as well that I think also cover really interesting topics. So do you want to just mention a little bit about that?
Okay. So I've done two podcasts, both with Amy and Choco Plumbeck. One is called The Evaporated, about missing people.
And this is people who are...
people who've gone missing in Japan. Every year in Japan, 80,000 people are reported missing. And the police don't keep good statistics, so we don't know how many of them are actually found. Mm-hmm. And the reasons they do that are many. Many varied. The podcast is also basically my hunt for my missing accountant who took $1,000 from me in advance payment and my shoebox full of receipts and disappeared in 2017. And by his
you had nothing to do with that.
I'm a pretty terrible person to be an accountant for. And the other one is called Night Shift, which is about a serial killer in my hometown and my father who started the investigation.
In the United States?
Yeah, in the United States. That is called Witness Night Shift. That is a really interesting one that is probably going to be turned into a documentary. But it's interesting in the fact that the nurse who did it probably is the most prolific serial killer you've never heard of. It doesn't say good things about the FBI either, but that's a whole other story. And then the other thing is I have a new book coming out called The Devil Takes Bitcoin. I think we have it up there. This has nothing to do with the Yakuza.
It's not about the administration of the United States, is it?
No. Oh, yeah, the Devil Take Me, if we call it the Devil Takes Meme coin, yes, definitely.
That's a sequel.
It's a sequel. Actually, Donald Trump made me rewrite this book twice because it's about Mt. Gox, which was once the world's largest Bitcoin exchange, and its collapse in 2014, and what really happened, and the investigation, and about Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht and all these crimes that center around Bitcoin. And Japan is the nexus because of Mt. Gox. They all connect through this narrative interface of Mark Karpeles and his Bitcoin company in Japan, which was the largest Bitcoin exchange in the world. And of course, Satoshi Nakamoto, the alleged Japanese inventor of Bitcoin, is in here as well. I have no idea who he is, but I have a good idea who he's not.
Great. Well, we do have copies of, I think, all three of your books.
Oh, yeah.
In the lobby, if people want to get a copy.
The Tokyo Vice trilogy, as you want to call it, in this order is Tokyo Vice, The Last Yakuza, and Tokyo Noir. You can read them out of sequence. Actually, if you read them out of sequence, you realize what a terrible idea it is to smoke clove cigarettes early on.
Great, and Jake will also be signing some copies of books if people want to get one. In the lobby afterwards.
I'll sign anything. I'll sign a postcard. I'll sign, something that you brought if you didn't bring your book with you, or you haven't actually bought the book, but then you're going to put a sticker in a book and sell it to someone. That's fine. I'll sign it too. Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jake.
Building bridges between the United States and Japan since 1905. Japan Society.